should be celebrating that. It's not because they failed. It's actually very strategic. If you look at everything else in our world, corporations consolidate for the purpose of building power, influence, and resources. Social movements, they bring a lot of people in and coordinate amongst each other to build power and momentum and influence. Why in the nonprofit sector have we demonized collaboration and called it failure? That doesn't make any sense to me. We are just starting to figure out how to speak with one voice as a sector. Look at what National Council of Nonprofits has done in the last year. Yes, they've been advocating on behalf of nonprofits for a very long time, but just this year, you started seeing advertisements for the sector. No one has ever, as I know, advertised on behalf of the sector before. Wow, that's going to lead to some conversations that we probably need to be having. I think that's a good thing. So this is a time of crisis. People are struggling, and I do not want to minimize the people who are barely holding it together and trying to continue to be the life-saving resource to their communities that they are. The helpers of our world do not deserve this. We should be helping the helpers, right? But the reality is this is forcing us into some conversations that are long overdue about having small organizations that have deep connections to the communities that they serve, but are not born accountants. We're asking a lot of people right now, and we should let them focus on the mission work, and in some ways support them more through shared backend services, through co-location, and in some cases through merger. But I think that just speaks to the fact that all we're talking about is the business structure of a business entity, right? A nonprofit is a business entity. A 501c3 is a tax code designation. It doesn't dictate much about your structure, right? And we just don't have that language to talk with each other about, hey, here's how we're structured, here's how we're structured. How could we combine efforts to do something better together than we can do separately? Because everybody is struggling with some of the same back-end administrative challenges.
Right? Love that statement. I'm definitely chopping it. It's going to be the lead into this. The for-profit sector literally celebrates when there's a merger. The stock pops. People are like, nice, we did it. And the underlying story in nonprofit sector is like, oh, they must have failed, which is why they're merging, right?
Yeah. And by the way, if you are going to pull that out, I just really also want to say, I know there are people out there who are like, the corporate sector is why we have a nonprofit sector. And that's true. Philanthropy only exists because of capitalism. There has to be inequity, and then philanthropy is supposed to be there to kind of make up the difference. I don't want to minimize the fact that there are corporations out there who are advancing their merger agenda and creating problems that nonprofits exist to solve. At the same time, though, I think we dismiss that as a whole to our detriment. This is a tool in the toolkit. Like anything powerful, it can be used for good or evil. And in the nonprofit sector, we have normalized strategic planning. Like I said, we're starting to talk about things like business continuity planning. Well, guess where we got that from? I don't think the nonprofit sector needs to look more like corporations. That's not the point. The point is not, we keep the nonprofit sector alive by looking more like a corporation. But I do think if we as a sector have any hope of gaining any kind of market share, of being any louder than some of those corporations that are not necessarily doing good in the world, we're going to have to come together. This is like a David and Goliath problem that we really are not going to be able to solve on our own. And, you go back to Dan Pallotta's talk from, 15 years ago. It's we're going to have to figure out a way through this if we have any hope of gaining market share. And I just don't think that doing it as isolated silos on our own little islands is what's going to allow us to start clawing our way at more resources and influences.
Yeah,